Ian has become Hurricane Ian, with winds sustained around 75 miles per hour and gusts up to 90. And forecast models are still suggesting that this thing is going to go nuclear as it rapidly intensifies into quite possibly a Category 4 or 5 major hurricane. Word has gotten out about this rapid intensification, and the media is quite literally losing its mind. States of emergencies have already been issued, schools are discussing closures, and stores are selling out of water and other necessities. The hype is literally out of control. I'm going to try to look past the hype and deliver all the information that we have now in a way that should really help you understand exactly what's going on. In this video, I'm going to lay out the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, and the most likely scenario concerning Hurricane Ian. Afterwards, you should feel more prepared because you're going to know just about every possible outcome several days ahead of time. First up, let's talk about a worst case scenario. And I'm not talking about hypotheticals here. In my opinion, this is actually the worst possible thing that could happen as Hurricane Ian approaches. Unfortunately, the latest model trends from the global models like the GFS and European are converging on a solution that looks specifically bad for the western coast of Florida. Both models have a very strong Hurricane Ian given a little tap to the coast of Florida before slowly barreling up the coastline with continued strong winds before landfalling near the Big Bend or the Panhandle. This, in my mind, is a very bad situation, if not the worst case scenario. As you can see in these model simulations, the storm approaches Florida as a Category 3 or 4, but backs down a little bit as the center gets closer to the state. In a realistic worst case scenario, Ian's going to approach as a much stronger storm and maintain itself a little bit better as it grinds along the coastline. No matter the strength though, in this scenario, widespread impacts are going to be felt all along the western coast of Florida, including wind damage, heavy rain, and high storm surge. This will especially be a huge problem in the Tampa Bay region, which is one of the most susceptible cities in the US to negative impacts from storm surge. Here you can see highlighted in red the parts of the city that would technically be underwater with just 4 feet of water inundation. Here's a look at what 6 feet could look like, and for our worst case scenario demonstration, here's what 10 feet could look like. It is actually a realistic possibility that we could see this with just Category 3 conditions. On top of the significant coastal flooding, inland flooding would be pretty extreme too in this worst case scenario. Some areas could see over 15 inches of rain as the slow-moving storm inundates Florida with water from every single angle. Also, as a result of the slow-moving nature of this storm, miles of coastline in Florida would be open to directly receiving damaging winds. As the core of the storm brushes over the western coast, places like Sarasota, Clearwater, and all the way up towards Cedar Key would have to deal with several hours of hurricane-force winds, possibly in excess of 100 miles per hour, which would lead to major problems. Overall, this scenario has less to do with the wind speeds around the center of the storm and more to do with the track and size of the storm. Just look at how the European model dances around at the perfect angle to quite literally send the Gulf of Mexico on shores of western Florida. This is going to be a very bad situation, whether it's a Category 1 or a Category 5. Okay, enough with the doom and gloom. Let's look at the bright side and take a look at the best case scenario. Interestingly enough, even the forecast models that are promoting the least impactful situations show Ian becoming a literal monster of a hurricane after getting past Cuba. This tells us that even in the best case scenario, we're going to have big problems. For example, take a look at the HWRF model. It's a hurricane model showing this thing growing into a beast of a storm, but the closer it gets to Florida, it just goes away. It disappears. It Thanos snaps. Despite these hurricane models being the very models that show Ian growing to be the strongest storm, they are also the models that tend to show high wind shear completely tearing Ian apart. The high winds aloft behind that cold blast of air from Canada we've been talking about act to decouple the upper levels of Ian from its lower levels. It's like if you're walking outside in a cold rainstorm with an umbrella and a strong gust of wind starts yanking that umbrella away from you. That would turn you into a weak, hyperventilating, shivering, dissipating mess, just like Hurricane Ian in these models. This would be a best case scenario because at this point, all of the models are agreeing that the US is going to see direct impacts from Hurricane Ian. So basically it comes down to if high wind shear and cold dry air can completely drain a storm's intensity before landfalling. If that actually happens, impacts and hazards are going to be minimized